Welcome to Vox Scream, a kill team podcast where we aim to help players of all skill levels supercharge their game and separate the signal from the noise. I'm Mark Meyer, joined by kill team heavyweights George Pratt and Joe Gallo. We're coming to you from the Triangle region in North Carolina. Thanks for listening and enjoy the show. All right, welcome back to Vox Scream, everybody. We've got some exciting stuff over the next few weeks to round out the year. George and Joe, welcome back. How's it going, guys?
Good. Happy to be here. Happy to end the year talking about kill team with my two favorite kill team boys.
Yeah, it's going to be a good time.
Well, it sounds like what we are going to do over December is we're going to talk a little bit about elevating competitive play. And I think that this is going to be a great opportunity for newer players as well as experienced players who are hoping to sort of take, their game to the next level. A great opportunity for them to learn just some of the inner workings of things that they might not normally think about. And George, I know that you've been wanting to talk about this for a while. Our particular topic for today, you want to maybe set the table for us a little bit here?
Yeah, so I, like most people, well, maybe not like most people, I did not play Kill Team at all until the 2021 version came out when it was its own game. I briefly dabbled in the idea of making a Kill Team back when I was playing Big Hammer in 4th edition. So when I started playing this game, the closest analog that I actually was likening Kill Team to was not chess, it wasn't checkers, it was a fighting game, oddly enough. I think that there's a lot of overlap between how you can approach a game of Kill Team and how you approach a match in a fighting game. And I think there's an interesting discussion there.
So for those that don't know, like kind of expand on that whole concept of why you particularly think that it's like a fighting game.
Well, that's a whole discussion we're going to have.
Okay, fair enough. Well, because I am actually like I'm fully unfamiliar with the idea of like fighting games. Like I've never like ever played any like games like fighting games competitively. The only analog I have outside of Kill Team for competitive play are like card games, and those are very different, two very different mindsets in my opinion. So this idea of like this neutral zone is a really interesting concept to me, and I'm really kind of interested to hear you expand on it.
George, you've kind of talked about this, specifically you've called it the Footsies of Kill Team, and I'm very used to sort of talking about this in terms of the neutral game. I'd love to hear a little bit about how you look at this framework overall, and then maybe just before we get into specifically how to apply it to Kill Team, we can kind of compare our two views of what this is.
Yeah, so for those of you, I imagine a lot of people, like Joe, is not familiar with competitive fighting games, so you would not be familiar with the terms that are used. So I'm just going to go through a couple of them. Like Mark pointed out, there is footsies and neutral. Footsies in a fighting game is that thing that players do where they move forward and backward. It's footsies describes the act of attempting to find your perfect spacing and denying your opponent's perfect spacing. Because in fighting games, characters have different reaches, they have different frame data, like their attacks come out at different speeds at different distances. So footsies is just trying to find that distance between the characters where you have an advantage and your opponent doesn't. And then the neutral game is just everything that happens that isn't when attacks are happening.
Yep. Totally agree about all that. And I think in terms of just like the idea of footsies, it's very easy to sort of think about that as just identifying threat range. You know, a lot of teams are going to have similar kinds of threat ranges when we think about units in Kill Team. We've got, full range shooting attacks. We've got 6 and 8 range shooting attacks. We've got I guess you would say your 7 to 9 inch charge ranges.
Yeah,
which is now like exclusively elves now, pretty much.
Well, it's interesting because George and we played a game yesterday, and I was playing Hearthkin Salvagers against Hand of the Archon, and it's very interesting to think about it in that sort of sense, where it's like it was very easy for him to sort of have a bigger threat range because I would have to actively move into his threat range in order to stage for him to be in my threat range in a subsequent turn.
Yeah, I think that's actually One of the ways to, I think, get better at this game is honestly to play teams with 5-inch movement, because it teaches you like specifically how important like that precise movement. Like for example, with you, Mark, I think you're very good at like precise movements because you play so much dwarves.
Certainly. I think, to build off of that, when I think about that game specifically, I ended up kind of being in a tougher spot sort of later in the game because I think a lot about having like a more like defensive and reactive play style. And
Mm.
it's a great way to play, I think, but it also can leave you in a position to not react to changes in the game state as easily sometimes.
Also, not quick enough too, especially if you're too far back.
Precisely, right. Like on that particular map, it was difficult for me to sort of move up out of my deployment zone and be safe, while also still maintaining that sort of defensive and reactive position. But George, what are some of your thoughts about this idea of like threat range and footsies?
Yeah, so I think about Kill Team. Everything that you're doing in Kill Team is mostly the same thing you're doing in a fighting game, and that the actual attacking part of Kill Team is surprisingly little amount of the actual game you're playing. Most of the game you're playing is finding the right positions so that you can stage, setting up charge, non-reciprocal charges if you can, non-reciprocal shooting if you can, denying potential double kills or even setting up potential double kills, and that's all movement. That's all positioning. That is all essentially the footsies of Kill Team is getting yourself in a position to get your plan off and also deny your opponent's plan at the same time. And like we were alluding to, I was playing Hand of the Archon. It's a 7-inch move team. It's very easy for that team to just be where it needs to be and set up non-reciprocal charges or shoot, move to safety because it's so fast. And where salvagers are more difficult to do that because they are much slower in comparison.
Yeah, it's crazy how we've kind of. I'm glad we've held this conversation off until third edition because we talked about maybe getting into this fighting game analogy in the last edition, but now we're seeing like a lot of stratification in these sort of like footsies threat ranges and stuff, just with the differences between like 6-inch, 4-inch, 8-inch range shooting, the differences between the 7-inch charge of the salvagers and their 8-inch charge threat range versus the 9 and 10-inch charge and threat range of these elf teams specifically.
Yep. And then also, like, even Space Marines have different footsie distances in that they can move dash for 10 inches and get a 12-inch threat range on shooting someone who's conceal in cover, where normally most teams have like a 7 or an 8.
Yeah, I'm really glad we had this conversation now too, especially since like Plague Marines are out, and I've been playing a ton of Plague Marines recently. To give like a practical example of how this is like applied during my games is I had my most recent league game with Scott, and that was a very competitive game because we were both undefeated. So he was playing the game of staying out of my range because I only had the 5-inch or 7-inch charge effectively. It's interesting because Plague Marines really more than any other team is a range management team because the two numbers you have to remember are 7 and 3, and constantly remembering like, oh, am I in 3? Oh, am I within 7 because I have a poison token and stuff like that. It was a really interesting like analogy to compare to fighting games. I think even like if you take the analogy even a little further, fighting games require like dexterity in your fingers more often than not, particularly like of how quickly you're able to move them around. And tell me if I'm wrong in that regard, George. But I think Kill Team, while it doesn't necessarily require dexterity of fingers, I think as we all know, we knock shit over all the time, is that it requires dexterity of the mind in a similar way of being able to react and counterpunch in the right way. Because I think particularly into going into second turning point and third turning point, you often, and George, I mean, you hear me in games often will go, I'm at a loss for choice because sometimes I'll have multiple things, and which option is particularly in our game, George, when Clowns, I think it was at the beginning of the second turning point, and I think I had like 3 like really big choices to make. And I can't remember which. I know you ended up saying I made the right choice.
Yeah, you scored points instead of trying to attack clowns.
Yes, and that was the thing. Is like, that flexibility of your mind to be able to make the right decision in the right moment is kind of very similar to me, and being able to hit the right button or pick the right move in the moment would be the analogy in the fighting game, because I guess, because every move has like different ranges and stuff like that. I know frame rates are a big thing regarding fighting games and stuff like that as well. So I think that's a really interesting kind of way to compare the two, that while one is obviously more physical, physicality and mentality of those two separate categories is really interesting to me.
Yeah, and just to preface this, I am by no means a professional fighting game player. I'm not even a competitive fighting game player. I play relatively, I'm going to say relatively casually, but the people I play fighting games with are fairly competitive fighting game
You have an
players.
understanding.
So
You
I
gotta be
have an
professional.
understanding of it. I just don't play it at that level because I don't want to spend the time to do that.
Yeah, my experience is very similar to yours, where I play somewhat casually, and I've done some ladder grinding for fighting games in the past, but like I don't think of myself as a competitive fighting game player as compared to some of my friends who are like, play at tournaments competitively, tier of players. But, having them in my play group gave me this opportunity to sort of think about the game in that framework that they're thinking about. And, to their credit, it has helped me sort of, elevate myself at a point. But man, fighting games are hard. Getting back to Kill Team,
Yes.
though,
Yes.
getting back to
Very
Kill
hard.
Team, something that you touched on, Joe, I think, in the idea of being dexterous, I think that split second decision making is really important in Kill Team. Obviously, think, if you're trying to play at like a tournament pace, you kind of need that skill. I think that being able to make decisions quickly and making the right decision quickly is really important, because it's going to sort of compound your advantage against your opponent, right? Like if your opponent is taking a while to sort of think of their move, and then you have your next move in mind, well, you just got to make that move right away once they finally make their move, and then sort of get ahead in like an activation advantage without actually having an activation advantage, right?
Oh
Like you
man.
are adding stress to your opponent while you are furthering your game plan more quickly.
I think it's how
Similarly,
I win 90% of my games. I'm gonna be honest. Like,
it is something you're very good at, to your credit.
like I'm I was about to say, y'all notice like usually how quickly I make my moves. Unless I like, it's a legitimately hard decision. And if I'm taking like 5 minutes to think about something, it's definitely a hard decision to make. Because like I think it's just the way that my brain is wired, but like I'm able to visualize the board in a way that makes it like easier for me to make like decisions. I mean, and to be fair, sometimes they're the wrong decisions, but like the ability to like, I don't think I've ever had a game run into time except like maybe once or twice in a tournament. And the only thing I can recommend to like getting better at that as a player is to like just take a moment like before a game starts, close like, and I know this is going to be a little weird, but like close your eyes and like really try to like imagine the board in a 3D space, and really try to get like good at visualizing what your like ranges look like. I just kind of learned that going along. So like I vaguely know what 6 inches looks like. Ha ha ha, penis joke. And I vaguely
Good
know like,
one.
yeah, I know, right? Like, I mean, 'cause, I mean, anytime I say, because when I describe this to people, people always make that joke. So it's like, yeah, I vaguely know what 6 inches looks
Based
like.
elf enjoyer.
Yeah, no, that would be based Slanesh enjoyer.
I know what I said.
Fair enough. But like, and I really do think that getting better at that does come down to you literally closing your eyes with the Kill Team board in front of you. And this goes to the neutral zone and the footsies thing that you were talking about, George, is that if you begin to like play out like what, especially if you know your opponent's team, right? And if you know what they're likely going to do based on the things that that team can do, it becomes much easier to visualize where they're going to go. I mean, don't get me wrong, you're going to get surprised sometimes. I get surprised often. But the better you are at doing that is kind of how you resolve this whole like neutral zone footsies issue, is that if you know vaguely where your opponent is going to move, and you know what you're like, and that's the other thing, No, having a game plan going for like into the game like from the outset is massively important.
Yeah, so
But
I
that's
actually want to say that it is super important if you can predict what your opponent is going to do, because that's what I did in my game with Mark here. Is at the top of turn 2, I'm playing hand, so I'm thinking, well, do I cunning? I've got initiative. Do I pass? Is he going to do stuff? And I looked at the board state and I went, that objective, he is going to needs keep. He's going to put down his attack order. He's going to do put out grudge tokens, and if I pass and he denies me my stuff, that's more beneficial to me than it is to him. So I passed, and then he looked at me and he went, "I'm gonna do stuff," and I went, and I told him, and Mark, you can say, I told you, I said, "You're gonna do this, 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 and this over here, and that's what you're gonna do over here," and he said, "Maybe," and I passed.
that's one of the fun of playing hand is that being able to do that and like it's very Drukari is making 40 chess moves for a point for CP.
It speaks to the way that just like in a fighting game, knowledge is such a huge tool, right? Like if you know this frame data for your opponent's moves, it is just going to put you in such a strong position because you're going to know exactly where you can be to mix analogies here. And it's going to let you know exactly where you need to be in the kill zone to stay out of those threat ranges. It's going to let you know exactly where you can do things like that, when you can use your cunning safely. It's going to give you those edges. Like I think we've all, at least locally, kind of had this experience where you know that your opponent has Seek Light. And so you're playing on these Into the Dark maps where, okay, this room is going to be a problem because they have Seek Light. And so we're just going to have to kind of find a solution to stay alive and get up onto that objective.
And there's also an added interesting element when we're in League is we play like each other in our community so often. Like we all have a pretty good beat on each other's like play styles in general too. So like what often will happen for me in the League too is I know what the optimal move is for my opponent and they often won't do it. And they'll do something completely off the wall and I'll be thrown off guard, which usually I can compensate. It's usually not the best move anyway, but what I've gotten better at is predicting my particular that player's tendencies. And that's a bit of a more niche thing because especially if you're like in the upper echelons of playing competitively and going to like multiple tournaments, you're not going to be playing the best players in the world very often. Now, bear in mind, me, George, Mark, we have. And that's where you can kind of, if you're playing those people like often enough, that's where you can kind of do that calculation, that different kind of calculation. But I mean, generally speaking, if you're sitting down to play a game of Kill Team, even in a competitive setting, and you know the person that's sitting across the table, a lot of like how they play is often more important than what is the most optimal move. Because sometimes, like I'll give you a great example. Mark French does not play Legionnaire optimally. He plays it the way he plays it. He finds success doing it. But like for example, his the marks he takes is usually not the most optimal takes. It's what suits how he plays. And going into my game with him in the tournament is the reason I set up a very specific way, because I knew he was going to play a very specific way, not the most optimal way to play that mirror match.
Yeah, and it's you're bringing up like playing into your opponent, and that actually brings up another fighting game analogy, which is why like you can just keep finding these in Kill Team. There's in the fighting game there's a thing called a whiff punish, which is when your opponent makes a mistake, you punish them. And like that's easy enough in Kill Team to like, you made a positioning mistake, I'm gonna charge you now. That's a form of whiff punish. But it goes insofar as in your opponent charged you and rolled bad, and then you get to attack them back, and they did nothing with their model. That's a whiff punish. But there are things in Kill Team that are whiff punishes you wouldn't think about, like Hand of the Archon Cunning, where I know your game plan and I know what you want to do enough where if I pass, I'm actually baiting you to forego your abilities. And yeah, I'll lose my stuff, but I get a command point for it, and you don't get anything for it. And there's stuff like that. Setting up a contagion with the icon bearer on a point in something that you know your opponent wants to like really get to that turn. And then that him being bait is essentially come here so I can whiff punish you after you charge or get within 2 inches of me and fail to kill my dude. And
Yeah,
stuff
and
like that.
literal practical example of that exact example you just used in my league game with Scott. I did that exact thing. I put the icon bearer right on the middle point. He moved, dashed, got him in 3 inches, and I reminded him, "You know you're hitting on 4s, right?" And he went, "Oh," and then did something else because I'm a nice guy for reminding him. I should have let him just roll the dice because that would have been massively beneficial for me. But there's something to be said about sportsmanship. So yeah, so that's a very practical like example of like what I literally did a couple days ago.
And to sort of take this in a more literal direction, I think we can all very easily imagine like the scenario of the whiff, punish, and kill team just whiffing on an attack, right?
Yes.
Yes, I in fact have rolled 4 attacks hitting on 2s with my Felgor Ravager leader. Did not get a crit to put down my frenzied opponent. Violent temperamented into a worse roll where I could not even get 2 hits, and then died to a frenzied Ravager. Yes, we've all been there.
I love violent temperament, dude. It's
so much
funny.
fun.
It's so funny. The whole thing of like, yeah, you got 2 hits, but maybe you get 4 hits. You pick this all up. Is just a very fun mechanic to me.
And it feels very chaos, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. Feels very chaos.
I am somebody who historically has not really thought much about dice math. That's not really the way that I want to play Kill Team. But
I don't either, to be honest. I mean, so because I'll let you finish your point, but just real quick.
Mm-hmm.
Very often, so like I think people get in this analysis paralysis of like what is like. I'll give you once again practical example. Because George, you and Mark Meyer were both there when Scott was talking about this in my league game. I think it was what was it? It was like the odds of getting 1 crit on 4 dice, but he had ceaseless, so it was closer to like 7 or 8 dice, right? And I told him before he did it, crit, you really like. I know vaguely the math. Like you should not crit fish unless you have like lethal 5, right? Because and this is what happened. I told him like if you do this and it doesn't go your way, you are going to probably lose. And what happened is I got 5 hits on my plague knife. I think he got 1 or 2 hits. I forget what it was. After rerolls, and then I put him on 1 wound. And that, I mean, so like I'll give you another practical example in that game too. So like that put him in a terrible position. Previous to that or after that, I can't remember what happened. Either way, he one-shotted my sorcerer with the Reaper Chain Cannon. Or not the Reaper Chain, the Soul Reaper Cannon. Which that was nothing I could have ever predicted. It was real bad, right? And that set me back by quite a bit. But you can't let like big setbacks like that really affect you. And being able to, pivot and adjust game plan. Because I planned on having him alive. I totally planned on him eating a shot, healing up, and moving, and that would have changed the game significantly for me. But he didn't. He died. So I completely readjusted my plan. I took a big risk. I put my Plague Champion up basically in the open because I knew I generally had the odds to win the initiative roll. So dice math is important and like knowing vaguely the percentages, but the most important calculation is, do I actually have to do this to win the game? And I think very often people will overestimate how important an individual dice roll is or an individual move is compared to like when it's actually relevant. Like for me, had I not moved my Plague Champion up to like deal with his rubrics and steal the point on that side away from him, I would have lost that game. But because I knew that like my guy's on full health, the guys that could shoot him are far enough away that he'll probably be able to tank the shot. And if I do win initiative, I'm gonna likely kill a rubric. And we were on 6 versus 6, so that was massively important, right? And I was able to get him within 3 inches to give him a poison token as well. So I'm going into that fight 5-6. So, just doing like I said, doing dice math is important. It's just you have to really get better at understanding like what is game winning and what is just slightly better for you in that moment. And like there's no shame in literally just taking a minute to like really think about it for a second, because my weakness as a player is often I think I have the right move and I'll just do it. Well, it can be a strength, it can also be a weakness. So I've tried to get better at just like, let me just reassess, let me think about this for a second, and do a little math in my head if I need to. But yeah, dice math is important, but just don't overstress about it.
Yeah, and that goes into another fighting game aspect of the mind game, and that's
Yes.
just a generic like competitive
Yes, yeah,
term.
very much so.
You should always be trying to play the mind game. If you play an opponent a lot, the mind game is much easier because you know their habits, you know what they tend to do, and then when you're playing other people that you don't normally play out of your region, like in a tournament, then mind game is something that you can put out some bait for them. You put out someone who is very likely to tank a couple of shots to bait out their big guns so that you can shoot them back. Stuff like
Because
that.
people love to get kill horny in this game, and they'll just like, oh, I can shoot guy, let me shoot guy. When often enough, like shooting the guy is not the. I mean, once again, in our game, George, killing a clown was not the solution. It was scoring the points, right?
Yep.
So like, don't always shoot a guy just because you can shoot a guy.
You can make these mind games while you're making your game plan if you know your opponent. For example, in tournament play, if you know you're going against a player who tends to go over time, you have the opportunity to make a game plan that scores you more points earlier, so that if you end up calling the game at the start or the end of turning point 3, you're in a position to be ahead.
Which I hate that for you, but it makes sense.
Yeah, that's the thing that I've learned in my first few tournaments at the start of last edition. Because I was going to time a lot, but it was never really my fault. And after I lost a game going to time, when my opponent took, the time that he needed to play, we were all still new at the game. I was like, oh, I just need to score faster if we're going to go to time, so that when we go to time, I just win. And that's what I started doing.
So we kind of touched on this idea of the neutral game. One of the things that I sort of think about neutral game as is, to what you said earlier, George, it's what are you doing when you're not doing anything? And obviously that's a little bit different in the idea of kill team, but another way this gets encapsulated a lot in fighting games is sort of like the rock, paper, scissors element of like going to attack your opponent. You can sort of say like, the three big things in a lot of fighting games are you're either going to like zone your opponent, you're going to turtle, or you're going to try and, like punish, right? Like really going for one of those three things and really kind of locking that in as like how you're going to try and like approach a game, or having an idea of looking for that in your opponent and then moving on to change the way that you are approaching the neutral game. So like, for example, if I know that you are going to turtle, okay, maybe I'm going to try and poke to just like chip you down and force you to come to me. If I realize that you are really trying to zone, okay, well, I am going to then switch to a more like punish focused style of play, because you're going to use one of these 2 or 3 moves, and it's going to be easy for me to like, go low when you're trying to zone with your, jab.
Yeah.
And so when we're thinking about this in the terms of kill team, what are these sorts of neutral game elements that we need to look for when we're going after our opponents, or that we can maybe sort of like build our own play style around?
Yeah, so I think the big thing to start off with, and this is going to be just dependent on what tac op decks look like, because I think a lot of the way the game is now, I don't know, we'll have to see if the data pans this out, but I'm finding often people are taking tac op as their primary op more often than not. At least that's been my recent experience.
I think that has more to do with kill op being just really bad to take as your primary, because you could just whiff. It's very dice dependent.
Yeah, but it's unpredictable.
It's very unpredictable. And then crit op, some of the crit
are bad.
Some of them are just bad. Like you just ignore them and you'll win the game, no problem.
Or you don't score till the very end. And like for example, what was the one last week? It's the weird one.
Extraction is one we just played. And like that's one where I managed to max in my game with Mark, and I was able to prevent Mark from scoring it at all. But at the same time, that's just one of those ones where you sort of ignore it for a few turns. And so that tends to be a low scoring one. So it would be bad to choose it as crit op, even though I maxed it. I so happened to max it.
Yeah, but so in general, I think a lot of it depends on like your opponent's tac ops and what the mission is. So, I mean, once again, practical example, right? So I went into Scott's Warp Coven. It was extraction on. We used Can You Roll Crits, Octarius map. I want to say it was like 5. I want to say,
We
but I
played
went
map
into the
6, yeah.
yeah, whichever the correct one was. So I went into that match knowing that he had access to recon and security, and then I have access to seek and destroy and security. I know that because contain is playing into my playstyle of both me as a player and as Plague Marines, that if you're getting in my territory, I'm likely going to be able to charge you and start dealing on some poison tokens. So, yes, I may score less points on it, but I will probably win that game because I'm killing more than he is. And I also predicted that I thought he was going to take contain. I was wrong, actually. He did not take contain. So I actually moved up more aggressively than I would. Because if we're both playing contain, right, one of us has to move up the board at some point. I'm tankier than he is. So if I just plop somebody with wholly within, that's one less point he's scoring. And I also predicted that he was likely going to take his tack up as his primary, which he did. But I think he took, yeah, I think it was either secure center or one or the other. It was not contained is the point, and I was wrong on that. And he ended up only scoring 2 or 3 points on it. So my predictions were correct, but that dictated how I played the whole game. Is basically that middle line, that middle objective, and I knew that where my objective was pretty tucked behind heavy. So if he moves up in that way, I'm able to counterpunch and probably either kill him or severely injure him. And then you also have to take other things into effect, right? So, like for example, War Covenant is very good at healing itself. So I'm constantly asking, where's the Tempiric Sorcerer? Where's the Tempiric Sorcerer? Where's the Tempiric Sorcerer? Because I know if he's anywhere in range of anybody, that guy's getting healed. So priority targets, play style, what is getting me the most points.
Yeah,
And
and
yeah,
I agree insofar that the neutral game of Kill Team does not happen really at the board. It happens before you actually sit down to play a game. It is coming up with strategies for your own team, strategies for the tac ops you are likely to take, strategies that go into your opponent's teams, their tac ops they are likely to take. And like, you know, really the only way to get better at it is to just sit down and take a look at all of the rules, which is a big ask for a lot of people. So it can be
when you say
helpful.
all of the rules, do you mean the core rules or the
I
rules of
mean,
your opponent's team?
all of the rules. That's really that's the best way to get better at Kill Team's neutral game is just know every rule. Easy. But again, like that, clearly that's a
He's
ridiculous
being
ask.
glib, but it's very important. Like truly, like very often, on my understanding of the rules will carry me to a win. Like it's very important.
I think that you could sort of tier this out. I think the most important thing outside of just the core rules of the game, first thing that you're really going to want to understand inside and out is tac ops. You want to know at this point all 12 tac op selections. You're going to want to know which teams are able to take which of them. And then, when you kind of get to that next level of important knowledge to know, you'll be able to say, okay, Hearthkin salvagers, right? They can take recon, they can take security. You can look at the map and say, okay, this is not a good map for secure center. You can look at your own team, whether it's like a fast team or a 3 APL team, and say they're probably not going to take contain because I'm just going to be able to easily move people in to deny. Or maybe conversely, it's like, oh, my team is a team that is going to want to hang back and wait for them to come to me. And so to that end, you can say, oh, well, contain would be a very good choice for them. So because they're going to predict that I'm going to want to play this way, at which point they're going to try and force me to come to them by taking contain. And you can obviously sort of think about it another way too, where it's like, well, are they even going to take that because that seems like it might be the right choice. But I think we can all sort of say, oh, well, you know, if you have recon in this meta, you're probably going to take recon, right? And so
Yeah.
it's those kinds of questions that you can ask yourself, to George's point, in the pregame, to define how your neutral game through that particular match is going to look like, to think about what your opponent's neutral game in that particular match is going to look like, and to start predicting those things for your opponent so that you can further tailor your own game plan around that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And then it also goes more in depth into know what your team does. Is this a shooty guy? Make sure that he gets to shoot. Is this a fighty guy? Make sure he gets to fight. What are his odds in fighting into not fighty guys, into meh fighty guys, into the Legionary Shrive Talon, you know? What are your shooty guy? What's your shooty dude's odds into shooting a guardsman, shooting like an elf, or shooting a space marine? And
also, I cannot stress enough that more dice is better. Like, particularly in fighting. Like, if you have 4 attacks, I don't care how high your damage is, 5 attacks is always better. It's just you're rolling more dice.
Yeah, that's a good shorthand. It's not like strictly always truthful, but nothing in this game is strictly always truthful, except that recon is the best tac op archetype.
It probably is. Yeah, because just plant beacons or plant beacons and kill confirmed is just ridiculous. But yeah, so I like this whole idea of applying other competitive games thought processes to this game, because I don't as much as this is the skirmish game of Big Hammer, I think these two games play fairly differently. Like, I think there is like general wargaming principles that apply. So like players that have played 40K will generally have a better time coming over to play this game. But like generally speaking, outside of like very basic we roll dice, is a very different game. I mean, the thing that I often compare it to is XCOM. If you guys have played the modern iterations of those games, where you have a set amount of points you're doing things with, you're moving around into certain bits of cover, and being obviously positioning in XCOM is like very stagnant, because like you just pick a place, they go there. There's not an issue of, oh no, I stuck my base out too far in XCOM, because you just go to a set point. But I think me playing a ton of that game super helped me in Kill Team, because it has that 3D verticality in the same way that Kill Team does, and there's also like ranges and stuff like that, and there's also like, it literally gives you the percentage chances to hit in every circumstance. So even like the dice math issue, so like my general principle when playing that game is like, if I had above a 50% chance of hitting, I usually went for the shot, unless I really needed to put that person down, if it's like 40 or 30%. And as many XCOM veterans will tell you, even a 99% chance does not guarantee a hit. So that's just kind of a fun way to like really understand this game in a comprehensive way. And I'll agree with George too. I don't necessarily like the chess comparisons. Like, I've moved away from that as I've gotten better at this game, because I think chess lacks the verticality that this game has, which is super important.
I use 3D chess as the analogy when I'm like trying to explain it to a normie.
Yeah, I'll do the same thing. I say it's chess, but with guns. And that gives a good, broad understanding of what the game is like. But once you drill deeper into the game, you start playing more competitively, and you start thinking about the game in a competitive manner, it is a lot less formulaic than chess or checkers, because dice are involved, because there's more ways to move. You don't need to move into set directions. So chess with guns is a broad overview. It helps people understand, helps people visualize what's going on. But once you drill down into it, it really is much more like a competitive fighter, and that spacing matters, distance matters, whiff punishing is super important. Don't let your opponent regain momentum. Take momentum as quickly as you can and hold it. Getting all that stuff, mind games, trying to tilt your opponent and not being tilted yourself. All that stuff applies to Kill Team in a way that really almost directly mirrors how it plays in a fighting game, which I think is super interesting.
Yeah, after 10 games in, you learn it. Yeah. Oh, this is kind of like 3D chess. 3 months in, you go, oh no, it's chess with racism. That's what it really is.
And fascism.
And well, yes.
It's 40K. We all know everybody's evil. Moving on.
Yeah, exactly.
I think the last sort of thing in terms of like fighting game, the analogy here to me is it's just like the combo, right? Like you win the neutral game, that's when you start your combo. And so
Yes.
this is a thing in Kill Team too. Like you are putting your pieces on the board to combo. If you are taking a shot with a plasma gun now against an elite, you know that it's a low chance to kill, but a good chance to deal a lot of damage. You have to know your combo. Like they're going to come out and try and shoot your plasma gunner. What am I following up with? Where is my next move? And sort of knowing your combo is going to be really critical, I think, to winning games competitively. And I mean, even just for newer players, just like knowing how your pieces combo together. And I think it's really just more like sequentially, like what piece goes after what piece, as opposed to like, oh, well, I'm in my aura. And so I need to, this piece needs to be over here in order to get the bonus. That's all comboing too. But I really just think like the sequence in which you're moving and doing your stuff is the combo.
Yeah, and I think for like once again the kind of practical example, Plague Marines are pretty much entirely based around giving out poison tokens. So 90% of my brain space is spent on who can I give a poison token to give me the most advantage into a fight or into a shoot.
Absolutely.
And that applies to a lot of teams. Elucidine Star Striders has a lot of wars that overlap. Inquisitorial Agents is the exact same way. A lot of teams play around the combos that pick up with each other.
Everybody's combos are different too,
Yes,
Salvagers
exactly.
right now, you're stacking your panspectral scan on top of your attack order and then trying to just maximize your chances of success.
I've also learned shouting Hadouken is also very effective tactic.
Hadouken!
That was really good. Holy shit.
Yeah. I think the only thing left to ask is who's your favorite fighting game character?
Oh God, I gotta go with classic Scorpion, man.
That's a good one. I liked Scorpion when I was a kid.
I also really like Mortal Kombat 1 as well. I think I really like that they did the 15th reboot of the series and it actually turned out pretty well.
I don't like the Street Fighter Mortal Kombat engine. It does not gel with my preferred way of playing. I enjoy the anime fighters. I like playing fighters that let you do fast combos and stuff. I am, however, bad at them.
Me
but
too.
I do
So like
like
Blaze Blue, Guilty Gear.
Yeah.
Yeah, Guilty Gear was my shit. Dude, love Guilty Gear. That and Smash were like my favorites, hands down.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with K. Rool from Smash. That guy smashes.
I will say, side point, I like my favorite like fighter like as a game. Soul Calibur, man.
Soul Calibur is so great.
Dude, I grew up playing Soul Calibur. Particularly Soul Calibur 2 is the GOAT in my opinion.
Yeah.
So good.
I mean, 3D fighters like that, I'm just button mashing because I'm not smart enough to play those. Yeah. I'm much better at like the arcade fighter and anime fighter style games. But like, for me, Bison from Street Fighter, from Guilty Gear. Man, I like Milia from Guilty Gear a lot.
I take it back. It's gonna be Bison from the Street Fighter movie.
Got such a good movie, by the way.
That's a way to describe it. I would say it is a fun movie.
Every time I beat my opponent, for you, it was the worst loss of your life. For me, it was Tuesday.
I love that movie. It's so bad. It's so good.
Just like this podcast.
Yes, yeah, we are cringe. We are not cool. We are not fetch.
Well, keep up the cringe, and we'll talk to y'all next week. Hopefully, we're going to maybe dig into a bigger discussion of play style and try and unravel some of those mysteries. So stay tuned.
We're gonna call this Domination December.
Yeah, we'll workshop that.
Slowly zips on leather mask playing Extraction Squad.
They did release the new Slanesh helmets.
Oh, that is true. God, I hope they make a kill team for them. God, I hope they do. They'd be so fun.
hope you enjoyed this episode of Vox Scream. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube, or anywhere else you get your podcasts. Please follow, subscribe, and leave us a review. Any of those things are going to help us grow. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back soon with another episode.